Okay, so we're going to get the meeting started. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to September and September Developers Forum. I'm Bill Ferrigno, and with me tonight is our esteemed colleague, Mr. Paris, Jim Paris, who we all know is our CEO, and we have three distinguished panelists with us that I will announce and introduce in a minute. I want to start out the meeting tonight with a bit of sad news I think everybody on the call knows about, and I want to recognize this. Most of you, if not all of you, know that tragically our very dear Joanne Horner passed away several days ago, totally unexpected. And, there's not really, I can't say enough about Joanne Horner because, I mean, to me, she was just like the core of our HBR of Connecticut. No disrespect to Jim, but I think, Jim, you would agree with me that she just like made things hum around our organization. And it's almost like she made things so easy that we just got used to meetings like this going off without a hitch. Most events would not, but she had a very wide array of talent that she used very sufficiently for the benefit of our organization. So um, I know I'm going to miss her. I'm sure all you guys are going to miss her. We don't have, I don't think any of the arrangements have been made for Joanne yet, but once they are made, Jim will get those out. So in honor of Joanne, I'd like to observe a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody. I just have this feeling that Joanne is actually in attendance also. And Joanne, this is one for you, and many others will be for you as well. So, and our best to your family as they grieve your loss. Um, so in this kind of a format, guys, with a virtual, it's going to be quite a bit different than our normal live meetings. First of all, there'll be no waitress or server around, so you'll have to enjoy whatever refreshments on your own. We'll try to stimulate this as we always do with some good conversation, some good networking, and hopefully some good information that you can all use. So if you guys are in possession of the meeting topic for tonight, basically Jim and I talked about how can we get some information out that would be useful for folks about what it's like to work and navigate in today's marketplace. I'm not sure any of us really have any answers with that, but to that end, we thought that we would have a perspective that we could give you from a recognized leader in the supply business of National Building Company. Kevin Goff is here with us to talk about that. And as builders, we're always dealing with, in some form or format, typically our buyers are in the mortgage and they need the mortgages. And we have Chip Banner here from, are you Liberty now? Yeah, okay. I should know that because Liberty is kind of like my primary bank. Chip has, I don't know how many decades you got in, Chip, but you got a lot of decades of mortgage. And so he's going to have a few things to say about what it's like to work in and around that marketplace and how we can maybe as builders and developers make that easy on ourselves. And then I think we all know Antonio Liguori from Calcani, who's an expert on both resales and new construction. And, if any of you have been around outside of a cave in the last few months, we know the stories about the resale market and some of the incredible outbidding and undersupplying of that business. And we also know the effects on our business as well. And Antonio is a expert in both of those areas. So what we're going to do is, and I think this will work out best for us tonight, we're going to have brief presentations by these three panelists. And Jim, as the host here, is going to be fielding any questions that you may have that you can put into, they can basically bring that up for you to look at, correct, Jim?
Yeah, folks can do one of three things. They can put a question in the Q&A, they can put a question in the chat, or if they would like to speak, they can raise their hands, and I can allow for the audio feature to be turned on for that individual.
Yeah. So I think to make it easier, since I mean, basically you're at the controls, Jim. So I think when we get to that point, I'll basically let you be aware of who's out there asking questions, and I'll let you take the lead in bringing whoever in to ask their questions. So again, we'll have a presentation, and I would suggest that as each panelist ends their presentation, that's when we would take the questions for that individual. We would move on to number 2 and number 3, and likewise ask questions. But at the end, it will be however you want to do it, and we'll see how we go with the questions. So, without further ado, I'm going to present to you Kevin Goff from National Building. I've known Kevin for many years in different roles, but Kevin, I think you've always been an outside sales guy since
yeah, pretty much, no matter what the title's been.
And many people know who you are, and you've been around for a number of years. So from Kevin, we want to get a perspective on kind of like this whole lumber thing primarily. Maybe he's going to talk about the futures markets and where we've been and where we're going. There's also been a number of shortages and whatnot. So you've got some remarks, Kevin, so I'll give the floor over to you.
Thank you, Bill. And before I start, I'd like to also extend my condolences to Joanne and her family. And I only had a few interactions with her, but every one of them, she made me feel like I was the most important person in the room, and I'm sure other people have had that feeling as well. So we're all going to miss her. So there's a lot to talk about in the supply end of the business, and all of you have been affected. You can go from, I needed a part for a lawnmower and could not get the part. It doesn't really matter what it was. I went to buy an ice cream and they ran out of a certain type of a cone. So every industry, every business has had some interruption in the availability and the pricing of products. Just as a crazy example, we have a restaurant who buys cedar clapboards from us, and because they use it in the processing of their foods, they buy all the short pieces that we can muster up, and we're happy to get rid of the short pieces because everybody in the industry thinks that all trees grow 16 feet tall and there are no branches. So when we can get rid of 3 and 4 foot pieces of something like a cedar clapboard, we're happy to do it. In 1 month, we sold 1,000 feet to the restaurant, and the price was somewhere around $600. 2 months later, that same 1,000 feet cost him $2,400, and that was discounting as much as we could in order to get rid of the materials that we were after. He was shocked and said, "Price of my meal just went up $250." So just as an example, it's not just building houses that we've got problems with, but it's really getting a hold of the materials that you guys need, having it when you need it, and we're at the mercy of the market conditions to buy it, make sure that we have it when you need it, and go forward. I put up the background of the current lumber futures trailing 6 months, and you can see the spike behind me was the high point right around May, I believe that it was at that time. And since that time, the futures market, and that is the investor's side of the business, this is what they think is going to happen down the road. The market went from $1,600 per 1,000 board feet down to under $500, and now it's beginning to climb up again, and it's approaching $600. What is a future? And I don't want to waste your time if you already know this stuff, but a future is really an investment tool. It is 110,000 board feet of 2x4 Western spruce. So if you buy a contract for one lumber future, that's what you're buying, 110,000 board feet of 2x4 Western spruce. Now, most investors don't actually take the lumber. They simply trade that position. and balance the cost of the lumber that they're actually buying. So if you get the big national builders, that's how they try to balance off these big spikes in the local market, in the cash market, which is what we deal in. And if they lose money on the futures, then that means they're buying lower on the local market, and they can balance their costs by using that tool. The problem was when we got up to $1,600 a thousand, the cost of buying a future became prohibitive for people to participate. So then you're at the mercy of wherever the market's going to take you. So the big question is, okay, the futures market, look at the chart behind me, has fallen dramatically. How come we're not seeing that in our invoices yet? Well, the truth is that we're actually still receiving the material we bought at the end of May. It's coming into our inventory at those high costs. And we have to try to hang on to that price as long as we can. And what happens is in the marketplace, competition, which that's what we're all built on, is that competition, who doesn't have a large inventory and is now buying current mill stock, is buying at the low number that's behind me rather than the high number. And it forces a company that carries a big inventory to sell at a loss. And you got to do it quickly. You've got to liquidate that high cost inventory so that the pain of, if the market should continue, the spread doesn't get greater. So the difference between the futures is that's an investment tool. It is most of the time a good predictor of where the street prices and the cash prices are going to go later on. Right now, the cash prices are lagging the futures because nobody wanted to run out of inventory at the peak when everybody was busy and before everybody shut down their sales offices and pulled back a little bit in July and August. And we were afraid of running out. You know, an example of an $8 piece of OSB sheathing that before this whole thing took off became a $45 piece of material. And in today's market, at the mill level, it's about a $12 piece of plywood again. We still own it at 39, but somewhere between 12 and 39 is what the market is going to demand a payment for on an article like that. So it's a very difficult time to know where your pricing structure is going to be. And quite frankly, you guys are going to tell us what it's worth, and it's only worth what you guys can afford to pay for it. So let's talk about a little bit of the challenges of getting materials. Vinyl windows, if anybody's in the building business and is using vinyl windows, has been the most erratic, problematic product that we've had. We've seen lead times go out to 16 and 18 weeks. And even those long lead times were not a sure thing. We have situations where we've waited 12 to 14 weeks, and then we found out it was going to be another problem because a glass supplier couldn't fit the bill. A lot of your orders right now might be arriving and the screens are back ordered because nobody can produce the little rubber gasket that holds the screen into the frame. And that's all due to a shortfall of a chemical that was produced as part of a PVC rubber plastic adhesive component. And down in Houston last March, or I guess it was the end of February into March, they had a big winter storm down there, ruined the plant. And that basic material could not be produced, so that plywoods took off, engineered lumber took off, anything that was glued together basically became a big issue. So those things are beginning to smooth out now. That plant has been back online. It's up to about a 50% capacity at this point, which still puts on a big shortage on how quickly they can get products into market. We do think that things are going to settle down, although some of the mills have already announced curtailments now because of this drop in the prices, that they can't afford to build the product anymore at the low cost of these products. There's a little bit of a natural reason that they're slowing down with the fires out west. That's a real deal. Not only do the fires take guys out of the mill, instead of building stuff, they're out there fighting fires, but the rail cars that we rely on to go from the West Coast to the East Coast can't travel through the fire regions. So there was an 8-day period that no trains left Vancouver to head east with materials. And if you ever saw one of those trains and how much material they carry, you'd realize how big of an impact that has on the East Coast. Ironically, the hurricane season, which seems to have been pretty active and in a normal year would have had a big impact, had virtually no impact at all on pricing in our cash market. It really didn't move the futures market. It really was kind of ignored by everything. Can't explain it. I've never seen that before. In the past, if there was a hint of a big windstorm, prices went up. Everybody started going to the store, buying plywood and hoarding it, and you couldn't get it. But I would say that we're looking forward to a more stable period coming ahead. It really depends on how much of the activity continues into and through the winter. If we get a normal pullback in activity through the winter months, I think supply and demand will start to even out, and I think we're going to start seeing a little bit better stabilization of price and availability, and I think that will be very much appreciated at all levels. We don't like these high prices any more than you do, because it just is, it's frightening to go out and buy a carload of lumber and see how much money you've got to put out there ahead of time. So I'm not sure, that's pretty much my synopsis of where we are on a grand scale. And if anybody has any questions about specifics, I'd be happy to handle them if I can.
Okay, so let's give this a shot. Do we have any questions for Kevin right now?
Nothing in the box as of yet.
Okay.
If there's anybody that would like to raise their hand and ask a question, I can turn on your audio. It looks like Terrence would like to talk, so I'm going to allow Terrence Beatty to talk. Go ahead, Terrence.
Thank you, and thanks very much for everyone getting together on this really sorry time with Joanne's passing. My question is just simply, I'm a realtor, and so my question is really for a customer of mine who asks, hey, should I think about building a house, or should I buy that house that's under construction today versus, say, waiting or changing their plans? What would you advise a consumer who's about to put down some pretty good cash to build or buy a new home right now?
Well, I'm probably the wrong person to ask this, because a year ago, when that question was every day on the table, I was personally telling people, you're crazy, don't buy it now. These prices are way too high. And that was when the market was creeping up from $600 to $700 to $800 a thousand. Never could have imagined that it would have doubled at that point and gone even further. The reality is the people that did buy a year ago are in a pretty good shape right now with the values of the homes and the way that they've risen. I just don't know what's going to happen 3, 4, 5 years down the road if the market turns around. Are there going to be buyers for that home at today's prices? I think that's probably my biggest concern. I know it is for my own sons who are buying houses at this point, and but now I feel like the old guy, my father. He buried his face in his hands when I told him I was buying a house for $40,000. But how are you ever going to afford that? And
Can't buy a car.
No, I know, but that the reality is that consumer is going to have fewer choices. Give you an example. GAF Roofing is only producing 3 colors right now because 80% of their business before all this pandemic was in those 3 colors. Now it's 100% and they can't keep up. So there's going to be limitations on their choices for building now. And if they're okay with those limitations, then, it's only going to get more expensive. I don't see it getting cheaper.
So you think selection will narrow?
Selection is narrowed right now. Decking, roofing. I know kitchen cabinets it's a real struggle with our kitchen department trying to get choices of brands and different things that are out there. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looks like we have Joanne Carroll who would like to talk. So I'll allow Joanne to talk right now. Joanne, you need to unmute yourself.
I think I just did.
You did.
Kevin, I just wanted to compliment you. It was a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Very knowledgeable and it was so easy to understand. My question is very similar to Terrence, only on the other side. What would you suggest for a builder contemplating a spec home right now?
Well, it seems like the spec homes are not making it on the market through the completion. It seems like the spec homes are selling and selections, before the selection process and the finish process, it seems like there's a buyer there. So if you're in the right place at the right time, it seems like there's a buyer out there for that home. And speccing a home, 2 years ago, we would have been telling people, are you crazy? You can't spec a home. You've got to make sure you've got a buyer and all that security. It seems to be out the window right now. There's multiple buyers. From what we see, there seems to be just multiple buyers. And we're scratching our heads and wondering, where have they been? Where did all the workers go? And where are all the buyers coming from? We don't get it.
It's amazing that they're willing to pay the prices that they have to pay in order to get into a home today, though.
Well, I do think that money is cheap. And that might be part of the problem, is that, while it's really good news on a mortgage, especially a 30-year security at cheap money like that. But the problem is that cheap money only buys a certain amount when you're buying the goods. So I think that explains the price increases, because the money's just not worth as much.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Kevin, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind asking a somewhat generic question.
Sure.
I'm kind of curious as to, with regard to the supply chain disruptions and the price spikes that we're seeing in the market today, that what, if any, sort of major behavioral changes have you seen from consumers and your builder customers? Do you see them trending towards different products or utilizing different methods that they heretofore probably wouldn't have tried?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I had learned this lesson 35 years ago when I was selling Bill my first load of lumber. I should have told him at that time, you can't have it. And if you wait till tomorrow, it's going to be more expensive. It just seemed like our advising people to hold off and wait went by the wayside, and it made the consumer more anxious to buy, because we told them in essence, we don't have it, we can't get it, and it's way too expensive. Don't do it now. But in terms of what we're seeing for alternative methods and things like that, I think there is way more engineering going into homes right now, trying to reduce the amount of lumber that's going into a house, using some of the, Bill's a good example. Everything he builds is at a much more economical 19.2 inches on center rather than 16 on center. We're taking some of the wood fiber out of the house. It makes the house actually a better house, more economical to insulate and to build. We're seeing way more of that. There is a company that has evolved who is starting to sell a steel panelized insulated panel. Doing a house in Simsbury right now. It's kind of a little bit ahead of the curve right now, because the building officials don't understand it yet. But we are seeing that he's got some interest in his product, and that's going to be an interesting thing. If houses start going to metal with insulated panels, I think it's going to answer some of the environmental challenges of meeting the energy codes. And that is as long as steel prices don't spin out of cycle as well. So people are trying a lot of different things, and buyers seem to be open to looking at the alternates. I mean, the guys in the real estate side might be able to see that better than I am, but our requests for those types of design estimating and pricing is coming across more and more often.
Not quite a question for you to answer, but more of a rhetorical question. Obviously, builders are adapting, consumers are adapting. I wonder how much the municipalities and the building inspectors are adapting these days.
Yeah, they are adapting and they are scratching their heads the same way that we are because they're being asked to look at these other systems and they're not familiar with them. So there is a lot of that going on.
Thanks, Kevin.
Anybody else with a question, Jim, for Kevin right now?
Looks like there are no hands raised and nor are there any questions in the chat box
Okay,
or Q&A
all right.
box.
Okay, good. So there'll be time later on too, in case we want to revisit that. So I'm going to go ahead and let Chip give his presentation again. Just a reminder to folks that Chip is a real expert in mortgage finance, having been around for, I won't say how many years you've been around, Chip, but you can, okay? But the perspective that I would like to see is, because as a builder, I'm dealing with the end loan product for new construction and all the variables and all the kind of regulations and requirements that are associated with that, which don't seem to be going away. And in the COVID age, it seems like it's just kind of harder to perform to them and get things done. So give us your perspective on that. And also, since you see people when they're going for pre-approvals and whatnot and kind of anticipating what they're going to do in the future. So maybe give us an educated guess as to what the fall market might be like and if, where we stand with that. So you've got the floor.
Okay, thanks, Bill. And thanks, everybody. I too would first like to just acknowledge my good friend Joanne. So sorry for the loss. And I spoke with her several weeks ago when she asked me to be on this panel. And I said, well, what exactly are you looking for? And she said, well, just the kind of things that maybe are frustrating as a lender. And I said, well, I could spend like the whole night talking about that because there's a lot of frustrating things going on right now, but it's not all bad. And I do think she's with us in spirit. And I just want her to know that I am saving a seat at our table at the Hobies. So there will be an empty seat in honor of Joanne at the Hobie Awards. I guess, in thinking about what's going on, I'm breaking down what's happening in the mortgage world in kind of two places. One of it is regulatory. There's a lot of regulatory issues and constraints that we have. But then we had COVID add on to that, and it changed things at a very rapid pace. And we have sort of come out of some of that now. I mean, initially, when COVID was happening, appraisers were afraid to go into properties, and there was a lot of things like that. And could you get by with a drive-by appraisal as opposed to a full appraisal? So there was a lot of challenges like that at that initially. Those things seem to have kind of gone by the wayside. But I think the biggest issue for us, or hurdle really, challenge is the documentation piece of the files. It's especially if you're dealing with a borrower who has done a mortgage previously, and they're like, whoa, this was nothing like this the last time I did it. And I mean, that could be as short time ago as a year ago. And so it's just getting people acclimated to what they're going to have to present to a lender for their loan. We've gone paperless, which that sounds like a wonderful thing. And in some ways it is. It's good for the trees. Paperless is a good thing. But it means adding a lot of time cataloging documents that come in. Borrowers have to get those documents to us. In the COVID world, when you're working remotely and you're not sitting face to face with a borrower the way we used to do, they have to get you financial documents. Has to be done securely. Some people don't have access to scanners. So that's a challenge of trying to get the paperwork in so that I can take my file and submit it off to the next person in the chain. E-signing is a wonderful thing. What I find is, though, e-signing, when we send out documents that need to be e-signed, we sign a reusable password. Nobody ever remembers the password. So the next time they get another e-signed doc, guess who they're calling? I'm getting the call. What was my password? And so it's just another sort of delay in the frustration in the process of getting the loans in process, actually. Bank statements, they were always valid for 90 days. If you got a bank statement in, it was good for 90 days. With COVID, that got shortened to 60 days. So now you're dealing with recollecting documents that may expire in 60 days. And so sometimes you're down close to a closing date. You have to get updated statements. Hopefully there's nothing negatively impacting those new statements that we get. But that's one more thing. That's another sort of delay in the process. So you've got to let people know that their documents are expiring more quickly than they might have before. And a lot of times borrowers, when they're collecting, getting us statements, they go and give us an e-statement. Well, some banks, when you go online and you get an e-statement, it doesn't provide you with a name or an account number. So, they'll send those in as documentation for their deposit accounts. And then we have to go back and say, no, your name's not on there. We don't know whose account this is and so forth. Just little things like this, but trying to get borrowers prepared ahead of time to understand these are the kinds of things that they're going to be faced with when they present their file for underwriting. We're doing a lot of pre-qualifications, pre-approvals, as Bill had mentioned, too. And I'm finding, and Antonio, you probably can relate to this as well. A lot of the pre-qualifications that we're doing, the borrowers are going out, making a very fair offer. They're outbid by over asking with a cash offer. And so what happens is you got a lot of frustrated borrowers or potential buyers out there that have maybe made offers on 3 or 4 different homes, and they got outbid on every one with a cash offer. There's a lot of cash out there, folks. People are buying houses with cash and not just small homes. So that becomes a challenge. And then that means each time the borrower finds another property, we have to modify those letters slightly. So it's kind of a recurring type of thing going on. But compliance, I feel like right now the mortgage world is really a set of stopwatches, timers going off all the time. We've got regulatory things. You have to meet certain deadlines. You have to follow certain regulations. And so it's really important for us to let our borrowers know that there are certain things that they have to meet as far as time frame. For instance, when we submit a file, when we get an application, and I guess maybe I should just first say what an application is, because there's a very strict regulatory definition of what an application is. If we have a customer's name, a customer's income, their social security, a property address, and an estimated property value, that is now an application. That's not a pre-qualification. It's an application, and that the clock starts ticking, and within 72 hours, we have to get a whole packet of disclosures out to those borrowers. And they need to acknowledge those and sign them, e-sign them within 72 hours, or then we have to send out hard copy of those exact same documents. So, that's one clock that starts ticking when the application's taken. When the e-signature also is important when you're getting toward the closing, because we have to send out a closing disclosure, which in some cases is an estimate several days before closing. But if your borrower does not receive this and view it within 72 hours of closing, that closing will not take place that day. That's a regulatory thing. So it's really important when we're talking with borrowers, when they get towards the end, when we send those closing disclosures, we're constantly touching them again and reminding them, you don't have to sign anything, just look at it. If you want to close on this date, you've got to get this done. So that's another compliance thing that makes it a little bit more challenging in this environment. What Kevin said earlier about I can relate to your cabinet delays. I do a lot of new construction for a lot of the members here. And, a lot of the construction is delayed because the cabinets aren't in. From my own personal experience, my son and his wife and family had a house fire a year or so ago. Everybody was fine, but they had to move out. And they were back in just after Christmas, and they had ordered their oven in October, and they just got it delivered a month or 2 ago.
Probably
So,
the one they wanted.
what's that?
Probably not the one they expected.
I don't know. And it wasn't anything special, it was just, But anyway, so, the supply chain is creating a bit of a problem. And then with that goes, borrowers are concerned about rates. They're concerned about locking their rates. And if there's a delay, what's going to happen with their rate? So, dealing with that type of situation, we have to have some flexibility with that. And we do, but it's, it's a concern. Let's say, it has a couple other things here that I want to make sure I mention. With some of the challenges, there's some positives that have come out of some of the recent changes too. We're now being able to, when we order credit, we can also, if the borrower gives us permission, we can access income information through the credit agency. It's a verification of income. So what it provides us with is not, if a company's set up on it, it'll give us this. Not all companies are, but a lot of them are. It'll give us date of hire date, year-to-date income, salary, and past year's income. So if we get a hit on that, we don't now need to get 4 weeks of pay stubs. We don't need to get the past 2 years W-2s. So that saves a lot of paperwork and some aggravation from the borrowers who are working with us. We're also seeing appraisal waivers coming in. That is where we run through an automated underwriting system. It's a Fannie, Freddie. There's two systems we use, both Fannie Mae and Freddie. And when you put in the information, if it deems that the loan to value is safe enough to take the word of the value that you're putting in the system for the appraisal, we get a waiver. And what does that do? Well, that saves the borrower $425 for one. I typically, if I get one on a purchase, I'll ask my borrowers if they still want to have one, just because some borrowers do. But I've not had one say they do want one, but I give them that option. And certainly a refinance, if you're doing a refinance and you get an appraisal waiver, I think most everybody's going to want to save $425 and they'll skip it. So that's a positive that's coming out. The only thing I've seen in that regard is there doesn't seem to be really good rhyme or reason as to what you'll get a waiver on and what you won't. I've had situations where I had a refinance, the property value was valued at 800, the loan was 250, I didn't get a waiver. Made no sense to me. I've had another one where it was like an 80% loan to value, appraisal waiver. Go figure. So you don't think my $800,000 home person was upset that they had to pay for an appraisal that they didn't really need, but anyway, it is what it is. So it's that kind of stuff that's going on out there. What else? And then we can also get verification of assets too. If a borrower gives us permission to do that, we can get bank information online that eliminates all the need for gathering as many statements as we would have to do before. It's been a challenging time. I think, the interest rates are still really good. So, there's still a lot of interest out there. The refinancing compounded this because you had a lot of extra volume that was coming in at the same time you were doing purchase business. So, from a back room perspective, we had to segregate our purchase business from our refinance business. So we would always put in our queue based on mortgage contingency date for underwriting purposes and then closing dates so that our refinance people would take back seat, to make sure that we could get our purchase business through when we need to. But, there is a lot of interest. What it's going to be like in the fall, I don't know. I talk with people a lot of times. They go, well, maybe I should hold off on new construction because it's so expensive right now. And, I just talked with the borrower today and he was saying, I might be able to self-fund this construction, be a construction to perm, not an end loan, be a construction to perm. He has the funds to do it. I said, well, you might want to think about that too. You could look at it from this perspective. You could take out a construction loan. You could fund it for the most part now, and then use the bank's funds towards the end so you pay less interest. But what that does do is it locks you in at today's current rate. So you could get a 3% interest rate now, and that's what you're going to have for the whole next 30 years. Where his thought was he'd self-fund the construction, refinance when the house was done, but we don't know what the rates are going to be when the house is done. So that's another way to leverage the interest rates right now. I think that's a something that people are concerned that these rates aren't going to be here for that much longer. So that's kind of what I had here. I don't know if there's any questions or.
I don't see any here is one hand, and let's see whose that is.
Like
Oh, it
Antonio.
looks like Antonio has a question. Feel free, Antonio.
Hey, Chip.
Hey, Antonio.
Going back to appraisals, specifically with a focus on new homes and new home builds, are you seeing issues in terms of appraisers having quote unquote difficulty getting to certain numbers depending on, the end value of a house from contract price, including upgrades, and trying to, because of the amount of shortage and inventory we have with closed sales? And, what are we doing in terms of getting that? I mean, I can tell you from our end, we see that on the real estate side. And I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are and what you could let others here know, kind of the trials and tribulations that both say you and I would deal with respectively to closing a new home that's been going on for, a certain build time.
Yeah, Antonio, that's a really good question. I actually personally have not had that situation arise on my new construction loans where the contracts that I'm getting, and whether it's an end loan or a construction to perm loan, the contract price and the lot value are coming in where they need to be. So I haven't really seen that very often. And even on the houses that are resale purchases, I've not had an over asking price under appraised yet. And I'm sure it happens. You probably see it more than I. But I have not personally had that. But I do about half of my business is new construction. So it's probably not as prevalent for me as it might be for somebody else.
Anybody else asking questions for Chip right now? See anything out there, Jim?
I do not.
Okay, well, again, we're going to circle back a little bit later on, so there'll be other opportunities. So thank you, Chip. Appreciate that. So we're going to move on to Antonio, and Antonio's got the perspective of both resale and new construction. Antonio, it strikes me that I've been saying for a while that this kind of extreme activity is not sustainable, and indeed, I think from our point of view out here, there's been a little bit of relaxation in that, but still inventory is way down. So give us your perspective on that, and then also in line with our other panelists, like what's it like dealing with these challenges of the I'll call it the post-COVID world, although I guess it's really the current COVID world. Go ahead.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. And similar to everyone else here, I want to extend my condolences to Joanne. The last few years with me getting more involved in the HPRA and my conversations with her, it's as if I've been in this group a few decades, like maybe some other members have been here. So very welcoming. It's definitely a sad loss, but wanted to say my piece with that. Regarding the two aspects, right? And we could focus on the resale world and the new construction world. With regards to inventory, Bill, I would say the same thing, right? So we're still in a situation. I've been reviewing numbers in July. Or August numbers haven't come in. So from a New Haven County standpoint and Hartford County standpoint specifically, that I'll reference, which I'm more in tune with, we still have about almost a 30% properties for sale that drop versus where we've been. So that's not good. But in conjunction with that, we've had an approximate double digit, so 12 to 15% increase in median prices. That supply and demand issue is still something that we have to kind of navigate. And what ends up happening is you have people that may want to sell or may not. And then, of course, either buy a new home or not buy a new home. And that creates some concern. For us in the real estate world specifically, what we have trouble navigating is, and what we try to work on constantly, is actually managing expectations. So for us, we're part of basically the entire life cycle of a transaction. We're going to get somebody who would specifically to a new home. They're going to come to us in the beginning, once that pre-qualification is done, and we're going to get them into like their dream home, right? But during that process, what maybe used to be 5-month builds at one time that was pre-COVID, we now might be extended out anywhere from 60 to 120 days further out. So when I say that managing expectations, the biggest thing that we try to focus on is steady communication. I think in the past, there may have been some thoughts where, oh, the realtor's calling. They're just, what do they want? They're probably bugging me. They want to know when we're closing. Realistically, what it is now is to provide that information. So when we know that there's an additional 6-week lead time with regards to getting cabinets, et cetera, that information for us to be able to provide to the end user, that buyer, that new homeowner, is really what we need to do to continue to instill confidence, right? And that consumer confidence is what we need to focus on, because in the end, without that buyer, that user, all of us, pretty much, we all have the same synergy. We can't turn over the inventory. But going back to the fact that we have that shortage in inventory, somebody wants to sell their home, or in some cases that Chip knows, and can speak on more, you might need to sell and close on your current residence in order to close on your brand new home. And what do you do in the interim? What do you do in that 60 to 90 days additional time? There's no apartments to rent. So that's kind of where you start creating that, that little bit of concerning. And that's where communication is key. We try to focus on either once a week, depending on the sensitivity of the product that we're dealing with, and or twice a month, some sort of bi-weekly piece, and just say, here's an update from the developer. We're currently at this stage. This is what's going on. If there's a delay, tell the people, right? You want to have an open line of communication with them to continue that, because you don't want deterrence. And in the real estate industry, what we don't want is other colleagues that we have that maybe don't sell new homes to be deterred from selling a new home. That's another concern that we don't want, because they might say, well, you don't know when the house is going to be done, or it might be 50 grand more than you anticipated. We don't want that either. So once again, that the communication and managing expectations is for us probably one of the most important things that we can do. With regards to a lot of the changes or in ways that we've been able to adapt in the industry, I mean, fortunately for us, in terms of getting people in the house or doing walkthroughs, a lot of you can do those virtually now. You can do them from your cell phone. So technology has been obviously a great help for us to allow to do it and actually get somebody in a home. And we've been selling. We see a lot of people from out of state. I don't see that changing from colleagues that I talk to specifically in the New York area primarily. Just the stay-at-home initiative is something different. And I think right now, from my perspective and what I'm seeing, and then I'm writing about it right now for an article, but is that the stay-at-home initiative is not changing. It's not going anywhere. And I think Connecticut has finally come into a position where we're taking advantage of our logistical position and between some of the biggest powerhouses on the East Coast, between New York and Massachusetts. So I think we are still going to be able to take that and work with that. What we need to do, of course, is just remove that stigma of what do we do with no inventory. So hopefully with more apartment buildings that are coming up and that initiative, we'll be able to not have or render people, so to speak, homeless. And that's really the only other piece. So that's it in short. But I figured there probably could be more questions as to the experiences that we kind of go through. More than happy to answer that. I think it's a little easier for me to go through that with anyone here.
Okay, ready for questions?
Sure. Well, I don't know, Bill, do you go first because you're leading this? How's this
No,
work? I don't want to.
I defer to Kevin. Kevin, unmute yourself and ask your question.
All right, Antonio, I serve in our town on a task force that is trying to put together a policy for the town to reach the 10% minimum affordable housing initiatives that the state has put forward. How has affordable housing been affected by all of this? And how can we reach the 10% goals that the state has set so that we can avoid the offset, I'm going to call it, that the state will impose if the towns don't do this? How will developers be able to bring that product to market?
Well, I think that to put an initiative like that out when we have an inventory squeeze is already a big pull and a big ask in and of itself, from my perspective. So obviously timing is not perfectly ideal for that. And take into account, obviously from your end, Kevin, with regards to the pricing to build, you don't want to deter a developer to say, well, what's the point of doing the project if we're not going to be able to capitalize, right? In the end, all the cogs in the wheel have to turn for everyone to have something successful. I think we really have to, I'm hoping with more apartment buildings and more inventory for users to go into, would help. But once again, I mean, I know there's also some prohibitive costs into getting into that as well.
Yeah,
So
it's a tough problem.
the timing is the most less than ideal timing to do it. I think more recently with the ADU component with the dwelling units, which people may formally want to call them in-laws, et cetera. I think that might offer some opportunity. The fact that we have a low interest rate environment, you can kind of consolidate family lifestyle to be able to get into a home or expand on a home and now create some inventory because you have two homes going to quote unquote 1 or 1.2 or 1X, however you want to classify it. I think that'll offer some benefits for us. And we're looking to put that message out there. I hope the Connecticut can do that. Maybe that'll help us springboard into getting a little bit more creative. We need, additional living solutions in order to get to that.
Thank you.
Antonio, just to follow up what you had said earlier about the, being sandwiched in between Boston and New York, that I'm on the shoreline, and I've seen a lot of New Yorkers coming in and buying homes or having existing homes that they're tearing down and putting in very nice home office space because they're not going back to New York. They're renovating these homes and they're tearing down what was there before and making these office space. So that is a real thing that's happening. And over the last year, I've done quite a few along the shoreline.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm happy you brought that up, Chip. And that's the same thing, right? We've also done analysis and speak sometimes, with the beginning portion of the pandemic, you're locked in your home. A couple things you realize, right? My home's too small or my home's too big. I hate my wife. I can't stand my kids. You start learning a lot of this in the business, but part of what we do on our end, of course, is to listen and say, okay, how do we create a solution? Like, what is the solution that we need for the user? And I think now with the creative investment opportunities, and tools that we have on the lending end, it's great. But to your point too, there's also detriment. So these buyers coming in from out of state typically are writing a check. Long Island dollars might go a little bit further in Connecticut than they do in Long Island. And what ends up happening is that ups the price, that creates some different buying situations for someone else where they can't compete versus that. But there's also some potential artificial inflation, right, in pricing because they're putting no appraisal clauses. So you get a little bit of that. And I think ultimately, but once you come here, what are you going to do? Go back and pay more taxes in a state? I don't see that going. But a lot of people I know, and especially in the financial sector, you can see that subletting is all-time high in the Manhattan area. And that's usually a major factor in terms of people don't anticipate going back into office space. And ones that have come into potentially Fairfield County, and I know enough people also in Hartford County, believe it or not, like from Morgan Stanley, that still travel back and forth. You have those people in Fairfield County and might say, hey, if my children are in a specific situation with schooling, I can move into New Haven County, Hartford County, pay a less tax rate, still stay in Connecticut, still be able to travel to any of the major metropolitan areas, and also two of the biggest casinos in the world. I mean, there's quite a lot of great things in Connecticut that we can, once again, I think we're poised for a really positive uptick, at least for the immediate future. I would say like a 3 to 5 year window, unless there's some major catastrophe that were to kind of hinder that.
Bill, it looks like you have your hand raised. Terrence has his hand raised, and it looks like Chris Nelson may have started a question in the Q&A, looks like his hand's raised now as well. So would you like to ask your question first, or would you like to go to the audience?
Oh, I want to be the politically correct host, and I think I saw Terrence is first. So we'll take Terrence and then we'll go to Chris.
Great. Terrence, you're unlocked.
Okay, thanks. And thanks, Antonio and Chip and Kevin, for this. Antonio, I wanted to ask you, because of your location, and by the way, your comments there on affordable housing, in addition to the trends that you see are spot on. And I noticed that for those people of us who are listening, which is almost all of us, we're so interested in what's next and what could be next for Connecticut. With the changes that are coming in zoning, and everybody would like to see more affordable housing. We know it's difficult to build for sale affordable housing, too many hurdles, and the financing is a little too tricky, too sticky. I like what you said about apartment buildings, but that can't go on forever. We're going to need to create some new buildings, some new housing stock in Connecticut. Do you see anything outside maybe the real estate business in your marketplace, whether it be some, influences coming from Yale or from even Hartford or companies in the region that are acknowledging this change in zoning potential, or seeing the opportunity to build the area economically? Are you seeing anything like that we could all maybe grab onto?
I've been in contact with a couple REITs, and a couple of things I've seen, like if like the Rent America platform, where these REITs will come in and specifically geo-target locations with which to add property. So they'll buy a certain amount of real estate property, put in their holdings piece, and then lease them out. But they have a term, so it's not like a short term with a lease with an option to buy. What I would hope to see, and I think primarily New Haven County and Hartford County, we're not in a position yet where a developer can come in and buy 15 homes on a 40 or 50-year-old street and do a tear down and go vertical and actually have some sort of a profit margin. In segments of Lower Fairfield County, that's doable and attainable. I think we're definitely a little far away from that. I think having further investment dollars come in, and I agree with you, I'm not saying I would love to see Connecticut oversaturated with apartment buildings, but when you look at the rapid influx of users that are looking for places because they're coming from out of state, we're displaced in terms of where do we put these people when they don't leave, because they get accustomed to Connecticut. So once again, it comes down to continued investment in terms of what we have here to create those opportunities. But New Haven and Hartford County, I can't see much more of affordable things unless we have more opportunities for people to have a different location to basically land, and we don't have it. I think some consolidation, like putting accessory dwelling units, could help. But once again, I don't think we're going to have 1,000 of those going up a year, right? I just don't see that being feasible, just from a development standpoint, because the developer is going to have to stop what they're doing to take these large remodeling jobs to kind of get those hammered out. And, I'm not going to go into their profit margins, but it might be equitable for them or might not be. So, but the more solutions we provide, I think that's going to help us.
Thanks. Yeah.
Bill, we have yourself and Chris Nelson.
Okay, looks like Chris go.
All right, Chris, you're unlocked. There you go.
Hey guys, thanks for the information. Antonio, I was just I'm still a little confused about the shortage of housing. Is it across, like, certainly some of the suburban areas, there's absolute shortage, but are the cities losing population, or are the cities also really short on housing right now? And is all this stuff just coming? Connecticut's gaining some population from out of state, but it doesn't seem like the numbers have been that big. We've been losing population for years and years and years. We've had housing for all those people. So, and I guess that also asks the question, are places like New York losing population? I don't understand how we're short on apartments and housing all at the same time.
So a couple things, and thanks for the question. And I'll give you a few different scenarios. So when I say short on housing, so the beginning of the presentation, when I spoke specifically on short on inventory, and the short on inventory portion that is causing issues because people are concerned about where we are going. So they're not putting their houses on the market. So that's creating that issue. And some people or some end users may not live in their current home, but they may not want to sell. That's one aspect. In terms of apartment buildings, from a few developers that I know and that we have done business with together. So I can't speak for all developers across the state, but primarily ones that are in New Haven County specifically. I know they have waiting lists for their apartment buildings, which, I mean, the statistics are there for that too. So that's what's creating the issue, and the type of, multifamily in terms of, a traditional 2 or 3 unit mix that is maybe 80 plus years old in New Haven County on average. I can't speak specifically to what they are, but in terms of, what MLS statistics will show for everything that is listed versus non, anything that goes on is immediately gobbled up, and there's just not enough there. So that's what I can speak to with regards to, the inventory / housing piece. And for New York, I'm formerly from the hedge fund industry, and I worked in that, and I have a lot of people that I still maintain contact with. And over the course of the last 12 months plus, at this point, 12 months going back, 6 to 12, there've been a lot of consolidation with hedge funds. And basically what they've been doing based on taxes, et cetera, is closing down. So we've seen some of them move into Fairfield County, but a lot of them move down to Florida in terms of headquartering as well. So those are some of the financial jobs that have kind of moved around. So in terms of, say, a massive exodus from New York, I wouldn't say it's an exodus. I think it's more if you're maybe at Deutsche Bank or Goldman Sachs, specifically in the financial sectors, a lot of them are working from home and they're not really going back. And home to them might be in Manhattan, but nowadays we're seeing them come up into Connecticut, Eastern Fairfield County, what I would say, depending on price point, some of them coming into areas that we manage. And I can speak specifically because we learn about the end users that are buying in our developments, for instance. So kind of a roundabout way of getting there, but it's just, I'm speaking specifically to markets that I am in and what I'm able to see. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Bill, looks like both your hand and Kevin's hand are up.
Forget Kevin, he's already talked too much. I'll go now. He could talk after. So Antonio, there's been some I've been hearing some chatter about, speaking of inventory, what will happen when, there's been this government stay on foreclosures, I think. I don't know the exact dates, but I mean, I've heard rumors like that's coming off soon. So does it make sense to you or anybody that if there's a whole line of product that has been protected from being forced to sale, that they may be going on the market through some kind of bank actions this fall? What can you comment on that, please?
So we have a HUD component, foreclosure component of our arm, and what I can tell you in terms of what I'm able to see is, what used to be what we called shadow inventory. Post 2008, there was lots of inventory in terms of not flooding the market to basically suppress additional real estate prices. They held back, which is why when foreclosures came on, they might have been sitting there getting dilapidated for 3 to 5 years before they even hit the market. Nowadays, what the government, most of their actions is doing is they're actually investing in the units and trying to get them closer to a market stable price. From what I've been seeing and what has been coming over to me in terms of inventory, we will get some more, but it's not like I'm going to get an additional, say, from our perspective, a 50% increase in inventory. That there's still not enough of it out there. What we're seeing more from that forbearance issue, which may be coming up, is I think we might see a heightened short sale situation for people that may have still been in a home that they've either had a very high interest rate or may have over purchased. But even that short sale window now, the deltas aren't large enough, Bill, to warrant even going into that. So there's not going to be much of that because of the increase in the median pricing across the board. And of course, with inventory shortages. So, you know, for us in CT, I don't see much of it. But once again, when I see CT, I always want to be specific. From what I can see in New Haven and Hartford counties that we're primarily our major presence is in, there's not enough information out there for us to be overly concerned with that. There still isn't that much inventory that has been held back. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Evan,
Judge,
feel
Can
free
I
to
go
ask.
now, Bill?
You can go. I give you permission to go.
Thank you. So I just wanted to make an observation. I have a list in front of me that I'm looking at of $100 million worth of approved and funded projects that are in Hartford. There are 11 projects that make up that group of investments that's going on, and only 2 are Connecticut developers out of the 11 that are investing in Hartford. What do the out-of-state investors see in Connecticut that we're missing?
So I could tell you with regards to apartment buildings and the competition that we're seeing, if you specifically focus on New Haven as a city, most of the investors are coming directly out of New York and or Long Island, and they're moving. There was a point about maybe a year or two ago, there was some additional investment that was done from some portfolios that were out of the country into Connecticut, but there wasn't that much. But it's just, once again, what's your opportunity? What's your cap rate in New York City versus coming into Connecticut? And if you're getting an end piece that, you know, is going to be like a $10 to $20 million building, you know, a half a point on your cap rate is going to make a little more sense. And you might want to come into, put your assets in Connecticut. But, you know, also, how many empty buildings are there in New York? So just looking at what's there. So that's where we're seeing some outside investment. I know there was a project, don't want to speak too openly about it, but you know, we had somebody out of Atlanta that purchased a product here in CT, and you say to yourself, I'm like, how did we not move forward with a bid like that? And somebody that is not even in our state, how is their money working in order for them to be able to make money that far away? Right. And so obviously there's something there, right? And that's what it is. But also I can't speak about, you know, what's going on economically and in some of those other places. You know, Manhattan, I think we kind of all understand, but you start getting into, you know, further south geographies, or I'm not sure how it makes sense. Distance and logistics alone have to play into it. So there's got to be something, or maybe they just found some money in a hole somewhere. I don't know.
If these 1,100 units actually do get built, Hartford's going to need a grocery store.
Yes. They will. People need to eat. We need a roof over our head. We need food to eat. We need water to drink and air to breathe. So,
because otherwise they're going to get in their car, go to West Hartford and Glastonbury, and Hartford will still suffer.
yeah.
No, it looks like Joel Grossman. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Antonio.
Oh, no, I was reading something. I'm trying to remember if it was the Wall Street Journal or not, but I do remember one of the biggest investment corridors, and I could find the article and send it to the attendees in the group. The most highly sought after area was actually the corridor between Milford and New Haven. And that was on a national scale in terms of being able to live. So there's, it's pretty wild. I know for some people who've been in the industry much longer than I have been, I'm more of a textbook guy when it comes to what my financial and economic means are from my background. But, the truth is there, and people are willing to pay. And I think the government keeping interest rates low is offering these opportunities. So.
Bill, looks like we have Joel Grossman.
Okay, Joel, go ahead.
Allow you to talk.
Go right ahead, Joel.
Okay, you guys hear me all right?
Mhm.
Okay, so, I wanted to go back to the question with the foreclosures in the state of Connecticut. And I'm not sure if anybody knows, but as enacted by the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, Connecticut has been awarded roughly $123 million to establish a homeowner assistance fund. The goal of the fund is to prevent mortgage delinquencies, defaults, and foreclosures among eligible homeowners as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. That money is going to be managed by Connecticut Housing Finance Authority for the, on behalf of the Department of Housing. And, they're actually working on that program right now to get these funds out there. So hopefully with 123 million, it will certainly help to alleviate any potential foreclosure activity and keep us from having that kind of inventory show up on the books. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. Is that Terrence with his hand up?
It looks like it.
Go
Go ahead,
ahead, TB.
Terrence.
Thanks, Joel, and thanks, Joel, for that. For those people who follow this kind of thing, we better have a watchdog group on that money, because even though we all have friends at Chaffa and so forth, that money could seep into the general fund in the next 2 years if we don't keep an eye on it and keep the information out there for the general public to know about it. Now, I know we laugh, but it seriously, it very easily could disappear. Connecticut has done it before. It'll probably do it again. So we want to make sure that this and any other program that supports affordable housing, we should be rallying around that as a group. I'm not sure how much we want to sponsor through this particular group, but through the home builders generally, perhaps.
Good advice. Nice.
Bill, looks like we have Eric Santini that would like to make a comment.
I see that. Eric Senior, go ahead, Eric. Eric, are you there? Oh, he's got to unmute.
Yeah, he needs to unmute himself. I've just asked him to unmute.
Have you unmuted me?
There you go.
Okay. All right, I've been listening to everyone, and I say, I should say something, because let's face it, this is how we connect and we share ideas and
Yeah.
Did we lose him?
I think
He's remuted.
here.
Can you hear me?
There you go. Sorry about that. It looks like you might have to repeat yourself.
Okay. All right, back to let me talk about the apartments, because it's something that, can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
We can.
Okay. Well, there was an article in East Hartford that where the cinemas, the theaters were there off Silver Lane. They were there for 7-8 years, and then the town bought the property for $4.8 million or something. And then they hired somebody to demolish it. They spent another $800,000. And I guess they have an agreement to sell it to a developer for $1. And the expectation he's going to build is 300 units. And something tells me there's probably more to come, either from the state or somebody else, to build these units, So that's one case scenario. This other case scenario is the opposite. This is market rent in Vernon that this foreign company built. And without getting into all the details, because I know a lot of the details and it's not fair to share them with the people, because it was confidential, people that told me. But at this point, the project was supposed to cost $60 million 4 or 5 years ago. And then they couldn't start because they needed more money. And so they were financing maybe 40 million with this small insurance company out of Rhode Island. And I think they're up to 80 millions into it. And basically, say the project cost 80, they got $40 million of their money into the project. And they're only gonna receive revenue based on the 60, not the 80, you know? So somebody's was willing to put $20 million there without a return for the next 10, 15, 20 years, God knows how long, you know, because I don't think rents are gonna go that up that fast. And then the other thing is that it's obvious if you read the newspaper, Biden's going to build the million multifamily, all this government money and so forth. So that is what ultimately is going to take care of the affordable housing. Okay. So us as entrepreneurs and the size that we are, whatever, we should stay out of it, or not at least we have a connection with politics and stuff to end up with deals like that. That's one. Two, it's obvious that most of you guys have been reflecting what has transpired from April to now. Last April, if you went on Trulia, I don't think you could find 50 houses on the state of Connecticut. If you go on Trulia now, you'll find a couple thousand houses for sure. I know in Talon County, there were like few, and now there are probably 100. And what these houses are selling for, I don't think, well, maybe we can get the foundation in, the frame in the second floor, but I don't think we could finish the rest of the house because our cost, it's so the resale market is still low, even though it's going up 17% or 20% or whatever, but not enough to offset 10 years of, say, 3% increase every year, plus 20% last year, and so forth. I just, while you guys were talking, I went on a phone and looked at Trulia, and I want to zero in on the Gulf Coast, which is Avon. And I found a house here on 57 Cider Brook, Avon. Was listed for $49,900, has been reduced for $29,900, 2680 square feet. The house looks very nice. That if we had to build that house, it would probably cost $600,000-$700,000. Then I looked another house bill on 10 Billmore, Avon, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
799.9, 4508 square feet, which I think today's cost, that house would be like $1.2 million. I'm going to be jumping around here from one side to the other, and I'm going to go on a lumber situation where Kevin was talking about steel. Well, history repeats itself. 30, 40 years ago, they were trying to make an hybrid stud that was steel and wood and whatever. And then they found out how expensive the steel is. It costs like 17 times more energy to make a steel stud than a wood stud. I don't know how many of you have gone on YouTube, but you can see they have a portable machines. It's an amazing. The thing looks like a trailer with a little saw band, and they make a lumber. Now, so dimensional lumber can be made that way. And now it's obvious that the plywood, because what Kevin was talking about, the glue. I have a friend in Houston. They used to be in a building business. He retired, went there to live with his next to his grandkids. And you went to some of those plants that were shut down at the cold or whatever. Well, what he tells me that they were shut down for maintenance. They usually shut those down a week every year to do the maintenance on them. So they were using the frost as an excuse to there's no question that there was demand there to justify them increasing the price, you know? So now let me jump to the interest rates. The interest rates, you know, we used to say, well, a government can print more money. Right now, they don't even have to print the money. They digitize the money. They pumped like $10 trillion into this economy, in which we're going to have to pay for. The Feds are buying $120 billion worth of securities every month, every single month. This is not saying about the 1.9 that the Biden administration did, and then what the Trump administration did before. So there's a lot of funny money out there. If there wasn't that money, probably interest rates would be maybe 1 or 2% higher. And that would have kept the sanity on inflation, on a shortage of goods and whatever. Because what happened is that we were all geared the past 7-8 years to do the amount of volume that we were doing those 7-8 years. And all of a sudden the demand came in and we just couldn't keep up the demand on top of the COVID situation, which they had to follow all the rules. And I'm sure there were constraints on a production line. So all this indicates that there could be clouds on a foresight year, and we should be. I know usually at Developers Council we advocate housing. We always say this is good, that's good, and whatever. But you know, we should be a little more realistic of what the heck is going on. And I can really see some clouds. Now I can tell you that what is happening. At least talking to some of the builders in Connecticut, I'm not going to mention their names. A lot of them, they're not building neither single family or multifamily. They've taken care of their properties because they figure by enhancing what they own, it's obvious they have these properties to do it, you know, and someone else might not have that opportunity. Some of them are building their own homes. And I tell you, this interesting thing, this poor guy that I use, and I'm not going to disclose his name either, but he built a pool last year and took him all year long. He couldn't get supplies, and the people were mad at him, threatening him. They got an attorney, they got this, they got that. Finally, towards the end of the year, he finished the pool, and he said that deprived them from using the pool. So I told him, I said, I tell you what, you know, just if you have an estimator, when you estimate the pool, itemize, and bring them all the receipts. And when those receipts were acquired, and tell them, go ahead, you want to take me to court, you don't want to pay me, but this is my evidence. Well, darn it, you got paid. That worked. He says, you know, Mr. Santini, he says, thank you, sir. I'm done with pools. He's building retaining walls. They went back to the old customer and they said, you know, why you want to do pool? Maybe you should enhance your backyard. So he had a couple of Mexican working with him. They were excellent doing dry retaining walls. So he says, the only material that I need is stones. And there are plenty of stones where I go buy the stones, you know, and I'm nobody's bothering me, making more money than I ever made and whatever. But eventually he's going to run out of those walls. So we could, the point that I'm using this example, that we could end up having some stagnation, and which is It's obvious, stagflation will probably continue for a while. And so we should be very careful. Now there are up markets when Chip, you were talking about the shore, I own a house on the shore.
Yep.
And I had an opportunity. I purchased that as an investment. I could have doubled that investment, but you see, you can't use that example because people that qualified to buy those things is like what? 1 out of 100, maybe less than that, huh?
Mhm.
And if they are doing what they were doing in New York, and all of a sudden they can work out of their house, they want to do exactly what you said. So I hope that I'm not contradicting everybody. I agreed with everything that you said, but I just caution ourselves for the future. And I probably should stop. I can go on more, but any questions, please go ahead.
Well, what I can say is that for you have done over 50 years worth of work in the state, I think you should be advised to listen to your warning. So, sometimes I've been around for a few years myself. So sometimes when it seems too good to be true, you better be careful about that. So I find it very interesting that a year and a half ago, we were still talking about the out-migration of people at the rate of about 30,000 per year from Connecticut. And those of us who've been here have noticed this since the year 2008, 9, 10, when we had the big collapse. And it's interesting to me that a worldwide pandemic would all of a sudden open up this state of Connecticut to all this outside investment, realizing at the same time, I can't get enough tradespeople to do my houses. But I find the thing so interesting, and it's so unnatural, and it makes me just wonder, where is the end? What's really the end game here? So thank you for your comments, Eric.
I wouldn't mind just chiming in just a little bit more to add to that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
A lot of things that Mr. Santini kind of went over, I wouldn't really put into doubt. I think if anyone from an economics perspective, history is always a great educator for all of us. If you focus on what Japan has done over the last 20 years, we're kind of almost following suit with that in terms of increasing our national debt. And our next viable option, we don't have a 2x on our debt versus GDP, similar to what Japan has. We're getting close to that point in terms of the amount of money and term silly money, right? That's kind of going around. What'll end up happening is we potentially are going to see interest rates at basically a zero or as close to that, similar to what Japan does. And in addition to that, the concern would be is they're the largest buyer of all their ETFs. So the country of Japan owns most of their stocks, which is another big concern. I hope that's not, a future indicator of what the United States is going, but from a global power and the amount of debt that we're growing, that's a concern. And that's strictly an economics thing. And if you're really bored and want to read about economic stuff, I can send you some of that old thing. But Terrence and Deborah were going back. I just want to say one more piece from a real estate perspective in terms of at one point, Connecticut was ranked 49 out of 50 in terms of our price appreciation and or price correction from the collapse of 2008. We've had a very slow point with us. Are we at that inflection point now? Yes, I'm not advocating for higher pricing, but just be mindful. Unfortunately, Connecticut didn't follow suit with the rest of the country. And, this timing piece, the pandemic, however you want to quote it, plays into that. So yeah, I feel that is deterred. And I also feel that the delta between our resale properties and our new construction is still way too small. And that's a problem, right? Because to the point of everyone in here that is a building and going vertical, your costs are too high. And we recognize that. But unfortunately, the delta just hasn't gone there. And I think it's because we've been so slow to actually correct our pricing schema in the last 12, 15 years. So this is my economic side. Sorry.
Interesting. Yeah. Jim, is there anybody out there with any more questions and hands up or anything?
No hands up, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, there was, to Antonio's point, a robust conversation in the Q&A going on. And just to hit the highlights, Greg responded to Joel's questioning and comments pertaining to Unite CT and the federal bailout for renters by saying that CHFA is on it. And that he agreed wholeheartedly with Terry's comments as well on the subject. And then Joel responded that there's currently a comment period going on now through September 17th, and encouraged folks to provide those comments to CHFA. And lastly, Deborah had chimed in saying that she completely agrees that the resale market is low in Connecticut. And it hasn't kept pace with the rest of the country, and points us all to Harford County and to look to see what the toll is doing. I presume that means Toll Brothers. And Deborah then responded to Terrence, or Terrence responded to Deborah saying that our market, questioning as to whether or not our market is too reliable on outside buyers, and if that might dry up. And then Terrence went on to state that there appears to be two economies emerging, one where the rich can buy new, and then there's everybody else. So that pretty much sums it all up.
Right. Okay. Well, I think we got to cover most of the more things than I thought, really. It's a very fascinating discussion. And I want to appreciate the inputs from all of our panelists and from all of our attendees. Jim, do we don't have anything to say about our October meeting yet, do we?
We don't. Only that folks should probably expect a survey in the very short term to basically determine folks' interest in meeting in person.
Indeed, yeah, and I think the next couple of weeks anyway should give us a clue as to what's going on with this Delta variant. But again, we decided to do this virtual tonight just out of maybe an overabundance of caution. I personally like personal meetings, but I also understand that there's stuff going on up there that we have to be respectful of. So with that, if there's no other input, I'm going to dismiss the meeting. I want to thank the panelists again. And so the bad news for you panelists is you normally get your meal comped. So you lost a meal, okay? The good news for the attendees is we normally have to pay for the meal. We didn't have to pay for a meal tonight. So on behalf of the Developers Forum, I'm going to say that we owe you panelists a drink. How's that?
Definitely a drink, yeah.
We'll buy you.
Well, Amarante still has they still have our $500 deposit, so we'll be going to Amarante's on the water at some point in the near future.
Yeah. Okay. So, Jim, do you have anything else for the good of the meeting?
I don't. Certainly, I know folks are very keen and interested to find out about Joanne's services. I continue to touch base with the funeral home and the family, and we're hoping to hear news soon. So we'll certainly keep everybody posted.
Yeah, and from me to Joanne, I did the best I could without you, and I'm just learning. So maybe one of these days I'll do okay. We appreciate all the stuff that you did for us. So with that, we'll say goodnight, everybody. Thanks for joining in.